We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
And you're back on Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I remain your host, Mark Angelides. We're very fortunate to be joined by Liberty Nation's chief political correspondent, Graham J. Noble. Thanks for joining us, Graham.
It's a pleasure, Mark. Thanks.
So there's one story that's just been... It has dominated the media. It's dominating the leadership discussions within the Democratic Party. And as far as I can tell, they are pinning all their 2026 hopes, midterm hopes, on this particular story remaining an issue, whether it involves the individuals currently in the story or not. And that is the situation with the recently deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who is common. And I've done a little, Graham, I know this is a story you have talked about before in your writings on LibertyNation.com and on C5, Liberty Nation's flagship TV show. But I did a little analysis of the media spread and the amount of times that Maryland Man came up on the digital front pages of the left-leaning media. It was Maryland Man, Abrego Garcia. And I was thinking, Maryland Man? It kind of buries the lead on that one, doesn't it, Graham? I mean, this guy is from El Salvador. He's an illegal immigrant to the United States, and he happened to be in Maryland. Does that make him a Maryland Man, or is that completely beyond the scope of any discussion about the legality, morality of what's happening with?
Yeah, that's just a red herring because they're trying to make it, the press is trying to kind of subliminally convince people that this guy is actually a Maryland native. And so they're trying to bury the fact that he's actually an El Salvadorian. But they need to be careful with that because, sooner or later, the conservatives who love to have fun at these people's expense, they're going to replace Florida Man. You've heard of Florida Man.
Of course. I was about to mention Florida Man.
It's going to be Maryland Man. It won't be Florida Man.
So there is this is
basically it will be a case of for anybody in this country who commits any kind of crime anywhere, they'll be called Maryland Man.
So there's this is completely off topic, but I hope our listeners will enjoy this little aside. There's a game that you can play where you input any date at all of the last 30 years with Florida Man in quotes into a search engine, and it will come up with an amazing story that more often than not involves alligators, beer, firearms, or
running down the street naked, being chased by the police or something. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if the next game will be you type Maryland Man, then any given date, and it will come up with some heinous crime committed by a criminal who happens to be an illegal alien. Anyway, that's something to watch for. That's the next game show that I'm watching out for on reality TV. So, Graham.
You're going to have hashtags, stand with Maryland Man, and they're all Maryland Man.
I'm just waiting for the T-shirts to come out at the merch shop, Graham. So we have this situation with Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Now, the Trump administration has credibly, I think, accused him of being an MS-13 member. An MS-13, it is as close as you can get to a terrorist organization. I think it fits every definition of that. Mm-hmm. The two courts determined that was not really an issue in question, that he was that. He was arrested whilst hanging out with members of MS-13. And there's this very interesting part where it's like almost like a dissemination within the media where they said the outfit he was wearing, and he was arrested for that because it was like a Chicago Bulls jersey or something. Yeah. And now that's supposed to, I mean, there's narrative manipulation behind that, I think, Graham, because that's innocent clothing. You might own that clothing. I wouldn't own that clothing, but you might own that clothing. But then you've got to ask the question one level deeper. Well, he was hanging out, and this is undisputed, he was hanging out with MS-13 known members, wearing a uniform, these clothes that MS-13 gang members wear as part of their uniform. So he was hanging out with them, so he knew them. He knew that was part of the uniform, and yet he was hanging out with them whilst wearing that uniform. That's the second level analysis that you need. And all we're getting from the media is obfuscation, dissemination, and let's be honest, it's kinderlevel garden analysis on this guy's situation. But why do you think that the Democratic Party writ large has decided that this is the hill to die on?
Well, it's kind of weird. I mean, I'll just throw in one thing about MS-13, and that is that, generally speaking, you don't hang out with members of MS-13 if you're not a member of MS-13. It's just, I'm sorry, it's just not done. Yeah, MS-13 gang members don't generally, kind of hang out socially with people who are not in the gang. They're a very insular organization. But anyway, so why are Democrats doing it? I think they're doing it simply. I really do think they're doing it. They've decided this is a battle of wills with the Trump administration, and they're literally doing it. They think they can score some kind of victory over Trump if they manage to bring Garcia back to the United States, which I don't see happening at all. And it's rather silly of them to think that they can go to a foreign country and bully the government of that country into sending one of its own citizens to the United States, even when that citizen had a deportation order against him while he was in the United States. Now, where the Democrats think they have that kind of like international reach and power is beyond me, and I think they're beclowning themselves. But to me, the whole thing about it, Mark, is they're literally doing this to spite Trump, and they are determined that in their fantasy world that if they manage to return him to the US, I'm sure they'll have a big parade at the airport if it were to happen, which it's not going to.
Yeah.
But this is all about, just this is to spite Trump. That's it. That's what it's about.
There's a couple of things I want to come back to on that. The first one is you said about if you're not an MS-13 gang member, you don't hang out with other MS-13 gang members. Now, can you imagine if there was, and I just want to run a hypothetical here, can you imagine if there was somebody who was put in prison for hanging around with the Ku Klux Klan or neo-Nazis, and he was just hanging around with them? Would anybody say, hey, I mean, just because he was hanging around with them, and just because he was wearing the same kind of, white robes that they wear, that does not make him a white supremacist Ku Klux Klan member, neo-Nazi. It just doesn't. There wouldn't be this kind of thing. So I think you're right that that's all agenda driving. And then the second point you make about trying to bring him back. Now, let's be very clear. The United States has performed, I believe they're called extraordinary renditions in the past, but that's always been to face charges, not to. Because here's the thing, what's the end game? There actually isn't an end game is the point. So let's say, beyond all credibility, the congressional Democrats do manage to do enough court cases, apply enough pressure that Kilmar Abrego Garcia is, let's say he's brought back to the United States. What happens to him then? Well, he's got a deportation order against him. And now not even Senator Van Hollen or the other leading Democrats who are saying we need to bring him home. And by the way, I should really use the air quotes on the word home there. But they bring him back and then he faces a deportation order. So he's got to go through the courts and then he will, almost without doubt, be deported. So that there's no suitable end game other than frustrating the Trump administration. Now, I want to talk about this mass frustration effort after this short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.